I drove that man to his office 41 times. 41 mornings, same pickup spot on Bay Street, same black North Face jacket, same Bluetooth earpiece already in before he'd even closed the door. And not once in 3 months, did he look at me in the rearview mirror long enough to register my face. I'm 63 years old. I retired from CN Rail after 31 years as a mechanical engineer. My wife passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Very fast, 7 weeks from diagnosis to the end. And after that, the house got quiet in a way I hadn't expected. Our daughter, Isabel, was living downtown Toronto by then, doing well at her marketing firm, calling me every Sunday. My son had moved out to Kelowna. I had the dog, the garden, the hockey games on TV. It was a good life, just quieter than it used to be. A buddy of mine from the railway, a man I'll call G, had started driving for a car service in his retirement. Not Uber, one of those corporate fleet companies. Blackwood Executive Transport, the kind that picks up Bay Street types and takes them to their 8 a.m. meetings. He told me it got him out of the house, kept him sharp, gave him something to do on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I figured I'd try it. Part-time, nothing serious. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I am not a dramatic man. I didn't become a driver to spy on anyone. I didn't have suspicions. My daughter had been with her boyfriend, I'll call him Damien, for about 14 months by then, and I had met him perhaps 4 times at that point. He worked in commercial real estate, lived in a condo near King West, seemed confident. Isabel seemed happy. That was enough for me. The first time Damien got into my car, I almost said his name. It was a Tuesday in late September. I'd pulled up to the pickup address on Adelaide Street, a condo building I didn't recognize, and he got in the back without looking up from his phone. I saw his face in the mirror, and I felt the air go strange. I thought, that's her boyfriend. And then I thought, does he know who I am? He didn't. I was 63 years old, in a gray driver's cap and a fleece vest. I'd grown a beard since the one dinner where we'd been introduced, back in the spring. More importantly, and I say this without bitterness, just as a plain observation, men like Damien don't look at drivers. They get in. They look at their phones. They talk. They get out. I said good morning. He said King and Bay thanks without looking up. I drove him to his office in 9 minutes and he was on the phone for 7 of them. I didn't say a word. I pulled over. He got out. That was it. That night I sat in my kitchen for a long time. I kept turning it over. Should I tell Isabel? What would I even say? That her boyfriend got into my car and didn't recognize me. That wasn't a crime. That was a Tuesday. The man was busy. I had a cap on. He'd met me once at a backyard dinner 6 months ago. I decided it was nothing. But then he booked me again the following Thursday. This is what I need you to understand about driving for a corporate fleet. The clients get assigned to preferred drivers based on scheduling. Once Damien had ridden with me and not complained, I stayed in his rotation, his executive assistant. I only ever heard her voice on his speakerphone. I'll call her the assistant. Would book me for his early morning runs, usually 2 or 3 times a week. By the end of October, I had driven him 11 times. By then I knew his schedule better than I knew my own. I knew he had a standing 8:30 call with a developer out of Calgary every Monday. I knew he was working on a land assembly deal in Mississauga that was giving him headaches. I knew he took his coffee from a specific place on Front Street and would be irritated if the lineup made him 3 minutes late. I knew the names of 4 of his colleagues, his direct boss at the firm, and his dry cleaner on Spadina. I knew all of this because he talked on speakerphone. Not always, but often. And when you are a driver, you are furniture. You are a seat and a steering wheel. You are not a person who is listening. So he talked freely. Everyone talks freely in the back of a car if the driver has been invisible long enough. I want to say clearly, most of what I heard was ordinary. Work stuff. Real estate deals I didn't understand. Complaints about permits. Arguments about square footage. Nothing that concerned me. It was the 3rd week of November when I heard the first thing that made me go still. He was on the phone with someone I'd heard before, a friend or colleague, and they were talking about Calgary. I wasn't paying close attention. I was focused on the gardener. It was icy that morning, until I heard him say Isabel's name in a way that caught me. She doesn't know about the Calgary thing yet, he said. I haven't figured out the best time to bring it up. I kept my eyes on the road. It's not a question of whether she wants to, he continued. And his voice had that particular tone of a man explaining something obvious to someone who already agrees with him. She'll figure it out once we're there. She's adaptable. He laughed at something the other person said. I told you her firm has a Vancouver office. Calgary's not that different. There'll be options. I gripped the wheel and said nothing. He wasn't moving to Calgary. He was moving Isabel to Calgary. And he hadn't told her. He was planning to present it as decided and then manage her reaction. And he was describing this as though it were a reasonable thing to do. I dropped him off at his building. He said, "Thanks," to the windshield and got out. I sat in the loading zone for 4 minutes before I could think straight. The thing is, and I want to be honest about this, because I made mistakes, my first instinct was to call Isabel immediately. I almost did. I was already scrolling to her name. But then I stopped. I thought about my wife, what she would have told me. She was a much wiser person than I am. When Isabel was 22 and dating a man we both had reservations about, my wife had said, "Don't say it. If you say it and you're right, she won't thank you. If you say it and you're wrong, she won't forgive you. Let her see it." I had said that seemed too patient, and she had said, "That's why I'm handling this one." She was right then. She would have been right now, so I waited. I'm not going to pretend the waiting was easy. There are things a father knows how to do. He knows how to pay for things and fix things, and drive to the hospital at 3 a.m. without being asked. He does not know how to sit in his kitchen on a Wednesday evening, knowing what he knows, watching a hockey game he isn't following, waiting. In December, he had a call that I've thought about many times since. I'd picked him up from a dinner meeting, not a morning run. He'd requested an evening pickup from a restaurant near Yorkville. He got in, already mid-conversation, phone against his ear, and it took me a minute to realize he'd switched from the earpiece to speakerphone because his earpiece battery had died. That's the only reason I heard both sides. The other voice was a man I hadn't heard before. Damien was asking about a pre-construction property in Airdrie, just outside Calgary. He wanted to know about financing timelines, whether a dual income application would be stronger than solo, whether it was better to lock in now. The other man said dual income would be substantially stronger. Damien said that should be fine. He said, "She's got a good salary. The mortgage broker will like that." He was using Isabel's income to qualify for a property he hadn't told her existed. I drove in silence. The car moved through the December streets, and the Christmas lights were up on Bloor, and I kept my face absolutely neutral because that is the only thing I knew how to do. When I dropped him off, he said thanks and got out without a word. I watched him go through the lobby doors and I thought, how do I do this? How do I do this in a way that she can hear? Because that's the thing no one tells you about protecting someone you love. The truth isn't enough. The truth delivered wrong can push a person away from you and toward the very person you're trying to warn them about. I had seen it happen. I had seen it happen in my own family, a generation back. My uncle, trying to warn his daughter about her first husband, going in hard and certain and watching her dig in to prove him wrong. They stayed married for 11 years out of stubbornness. 11 years. I was not going to do that to Isabel. I started keeping notes. Just dates and rough summaries of what I'd heard. Nothing formal. If I ever needed to show her, I wanted to be able to say, here is what I heard, and here is when I heard it. I also started recording the rides. I need to be direct about that. In Ontario, one-party consent applies to recordings. If you are a party to the conversation, you can record it. I was in the car. He was speaking aloud in my presence. I wasn't hiding a device on his person. I recorded 13 rides in total on my phone, kept in a folder, backed up twice. I'm not proud of the ambiguity of it. But I'm not ashamed either. In January, Isabel called me on a Sunday, our usual call, and she sounded distracted in a way I recognized. I asked her how things were with Damien. She said fine. I asked if anything new was happening with him. There was a pause. She said he'd mentioned something about a work opportunity out west, but they hadn't really talked about it yet. How do you feel about that? I asked. Another pause. I don't know. He kind of brought it up and then dropped it. I'm sure we'll talk more. I said, okay. I said, let me know how that goes. I did not say what I knew. I said goodbye and I sat in my truck for a moment in the driveway, doing the math on how long I could reasonably hold this. The answer turned out to be, until February. In the second week of February, he got into my car on a Thursday morning, in the best mood I had ever seen him in. I could feel it immediately. He sat differently. He wasn't already on the phone. He made a comment about the cold. He made a small joke about the traffic. He said, "Any chance of getting through downtown faster this morning?" I said, "I can try the back route. Less predictable, but it moves." He said, "Let's do it." It was the most we had ever spoken. 63 words in 14 weeks. Then the phone call came. He took it on his earpiece at first, but switched to speaker after a minute. The usual reason, I assume, and within 30 seconds, I understood that he was talking to a mortgage broker. They were confirming a pre-approval. They were confirming the address in Airdrie. They were confirming that the application had gone through under 2 incomes, one of which was Isabel's, her name, her salary figure, her employment verification, and Damien was saying, yes, yes. That all sounded right. Could they lock the rate by end of week? He had submitted her financial information to a mortgage application without her knowledge. That was the line. I said nothing. I dropped him off. I waited until I was parked under the gardener, and I sat there for 11 minutes, and then I called my son in Kelowna and told him everything. My son, who is practical and direct and does not panic, said, "Dad, you need to tell her. Not everything at once, but you need to start." I said I was worried she wouldn't believe me. He said, "She doesn't have to believe you yet. She just has to hear it." That was the right way to say it. I don't know why, but it unlocked something. I called Isabel that evening. I didn't tell her about the driving. Not yet. I was still working up to that part. I just said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Has Damien ever asked you for any of your financial documents? Pay stubs, employment letters, anything like that?" A silence, longer than I expected. "He asked me for my last 2 pay stubs back in November," she said slowly. "He said it was for something at work. He was comparing compensation for a presentation." I said, "And did you ask to see the presentation after?" Another silence. "No," she said. "He never mentioned it again." I said, "Isabel, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me get through it before you say anything." I told her about the driving. I told her the whole thing. The first morning, the cap, the beard, the way he never looked up. I told her about the Calgary conversations. I told her about the mortgage call. I told her about the recordings. I offered to send them to her. I said I had not listened to them again since I made them. I had just kept them as a record, but they were hers if she wanted them. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, "You've been driving him for how long?" I said, "Since September." She said, "And he never recognized you?" I said, "Not once." She didn't say anything for another moment. Then, "He met you at dinner that first time. He sat across from you for 2 hours." I said, "Yes." And that, I think, is what broke through. Not the mortgage, not Calgary, not any of it. The fact that her father had sat across from this man at a dinner table, shaken his hand, talked to him about the Leafs and the cost of lumber, and the summer he and her mother drove across the country. And 14 months later, that same man had sat behind him in a car 41 times without registering his face. She asked for the recordings that night. I sent them. I didn't hear from her for 3 days. When she called back, she told me she'd listened to all of them. She'd also called the mortgage broker directly. She had found the firm's name in the pre-approval document Damien had left in a shared folder on their household account, which she'd never had reason to check before. And she had confirmed that yes, her name and income were on an active application, and no, she had not been present when it was submitted. The mortgage broker was apologetic, said it wasn't unusual for one partner to gather the documents, said she could withdraw consent and have herself removed. She withdrew consent that afternoon. She didn't ask me to come to the conversation she had with Damien. I didn't offer. That was between them. What I know is that it lasted about 40 minutes, that it happened in his condo, and that she came to my house afterward and sat at my kitchen table, and drank tea and didn't say very much. I made her the chicken soup I used to make when she was sick as a kid. Tinned tomatoes, egg noodles, the kind that takes 20 minutes and tastes like nothing special but means I'm here. She ate 2 bowls. She said, he wasn't even sorry. He said I was being inflexible. He said most women would want their partner to take the lead on these things. I said, what did you say? She said I said I wasn't most women. And then I left. She gave the ring back by courier 2 days later. Small blue box, Canada Post. She told me that detail and I thought it was exactly right. Some things don't need ceremony. There are a few things I've thought about since. Things I'd want to say to anyone in a similar situation. Not that I'm an expert. I'm just a retired engineer who drove a car. The mortgage was the clearest wrongdoing, but it wasn't the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem was that Damien had decided what Isabel's life would look like and was arranging the pieces without consulting her. The money was just the mechanism. The controlling impulse was older than any of those phone calls. I think about the comment a woman left on a video I came across. Something about narcissists not seeing the people who serve them. She wasn't wrong. I drove that man 41 times and he never saw a person in the front seat. He saw a service. He probably thought of Isabel the same way. If I'm honest, not a partner, but a component. Someone whose salary would look good on a mortgage application, whose adaptability could be managed, whose objections could be reframed as inflexibility. She was 29 years old, and she had worked hard and built a good life in Toronto. And he was going to pick it up and relocate it to Airdrie, Alberta, without asking, because he'd decided it fit his plans. She's back to her regular life now. New apartment, nicer neighborhood, slightly better commute to work. She calls me on Sundays, same as always. She mentioned recently that she'd started having dinners out with friends again. Things she'd apparently stopped doing without quite noticing she'd stopped. She sounded like herself. That's the best I can tell you. My son came home for a week in March, and the 3 of us went up to the cottage, my wife's parents' cottage, the one we inherited, on a lake north of Perry Sound. It was still cold, still that gray early spring light, but we got the dock cleared off and made a fire in the evening and ate badly and played cards and argued about nothing important. The dog got into the woodpile. I lost $11 to my son at cribbage. Isabel slept late every morning, which she hadn't done since she was a teenager. I still drive for Blackwood Executive 2 mornings a week. I like the routine. I like being out early when the city is just waking up and the roads are clear and the radio is low. Last Tuesday, I had a quiet ride downtown. Just a woman in her 40s reading on her phone the whole way. Polite, tipped well. Completely ordinary. That's most of it. Most of it is ordinary. You just have to stay awake.